Right, joining me now, someone who knows a fair bit about energy, Sky's political contributor, Chris Uhlmann. We'll stay with net zero, but we'll look at the polling that's out overnight from Redbridge. This is 24% primary there for the Liberals. We'll put that back up on screen. That's where it was, Chris, in the recent news poll. More ground gained, though, to One Nation, up 4 to 18%. I think that'd be a historic high for them. Labor's, 38 in their primaries, strong, given where they have, over recent years, lost the vote to the Greens. So a lot was made of these numbers today, but they were out in the field doing the polling at the same time that the Liberals were, bitching and moaning and making their decision. I wouldn't worry about the polling, to be serious, until sort of February, March next year. I think they've got to get out into the marketplace. They've got to argue the case as to why they needed to dump net zero and why the government keeping it is hurting you and hurting your business. I think that's really important. And I think just like The Voice, that's going to take some serious effort and a bit of time.
Yeah, Peter, well, look, it's hardly surprising that the Liberals' numbers would be bad, given the division that we've seen on show now for so long. They've been unable to get their act together. Now, what we saw over the course of the weekend was finally the coalition appearing to get their act together. That is, at least they are now all on the same page, the National Party and the Liberal Party on the same page. Obviously, there'll be people who are deeply disappointed inside that Liberal Party room at the moment. They may well express their disappointment in different ways, but the party's position is now clear, and it is one that is defensible. So it is one that they should now prosecute. It's now time for damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. The polls are bad for the Liberal Party. What they should be looking to do is how they turn those polls around. We know that people do want to do something about the environment. They do care about the climate, but they also care very much about their hip pocket. The question has to be asked how much they're prepared to pay for changing or trying to change the way that we do transmission in our electricity system. Now, that's the big question. It is, can the Liberal Party make an argument that what we're seeing with the rollout of this energy transition is actually driving up electricity bills, which it is? Can they make the argument that it's not cheap and that it's not green, because we need so much of the landscape eaten up by this form of power in order to provide the power that we used to once enjoy, because we're going from dense systems of power to very diverse systems of power, dispersed systems of power. So I think the argument is there to be made, and I agree with what you said earlier. Give Susan Lee a chance to make that argument, and do not fight among yourselves, at least for a little while. Let's see how this settles in. Make the case. See if you can change people's opinions rather than trying to ride the winds of their opinions.
And of course, we're looking at what's happening around the world. The rest of the world is not where we are. They have moved into a completely different, I think, more practical, more rational, low emissions debate. We just think we can change the world's climate and the temperature from Australia's position alone. And we're not realistic about what it's going to do to our economy. We've got all the issues of geography, which you and I have talked about plenty of times here. We put these renewable assets out in the bush, but we've got to really transmit the power into the urban areas, and that has huge environmental implications. So you look at what's happening in Brazil, these COP festivals, and, they are talk fests. They are nothing like the high-level events they used to be, Chris, where they, we'll go back to Copenhagen, in 2008 and 2009 and Kevin Rudd, and the focus on those events, every world leader felt they had to turn up. It dominated debate in our own countries at the time. That's not the case now. Most are not even turning up with their targets as they are supposed to do. I think the debate has absolutely moved on, and we're stuck in the rear vision mirror still angling and fighting about net zero when most of the world's not even talking about net zero.
It's clear that there's no way that these targets can possibly be met. The International Energy Agency brought out its World Energy Outlook last week, and when you look at its net zero scenarios, not even the International Energy Agency believes this stuff anymore. When it talks about what you would have to do now to try and get the globe to net zero by 2050, it's stretching the bounds of feasibility, is what it says now. It would be an almost, or actually an impossible task. So what we're seeing is the rest of the world now has got energy security really firmly in its sights, is what it wants. Energy affordability is also hugely important. And there's a move away from concern about trying to cut carbon emissions out of systems. Now, that doesn't mean that people aren't moving, that there will be a lot more wind and solar put in the grids. But what Australia needs to do is look at what it's best for it and what targets it needs to set that are comparable with the rest of the world. We're not talking about stopping this stuff altogether. We're talking about what level of wind and solar on a grid is a manageable amount and what will help to keep the system both stable and affordable. And certainly the track that we're on at the moment is not doing that.
Well, let's go to the Liberal Party. We're talking about Liberals and leadership. The Liberal Party in Victoria. I was driving into the studio and I got a call from someone who said it's on. I said, it's on what, federally? I don't think that's right. And they said, no, it's on in Victoria. I nearly ran off the road. I said, Brad Batten is ahead in the polls. They're finally competitive. The biggest story in town, not the only story, but the biggest story in town is law and order in crime, so much so that Jacinta Allen is out there with a fake sort of make-believe announcement on a daily basis because it's, obviously poison internally in her polling. And tonight, unnamed group went in and knocked on his door and said, Brad Batten, you've got to stand down. He says, well, I won't be standing down. And there will be a leadership spill, we think, as early as tomorrow. And the front runner, Jess Wilson, and I think she's, a good and decent sort of new entrant into the parliament. She's just taken on the job of Shadow Treasurer. I think she's competent. But she hasn't even been in the parliament a term. This is her first term, and her name's being mooted as leader. Now, I think as a former cop in a place like Victoria, given 150 home invasions on average, Chris, a week, the Liberals have somehow managed to look like they're determined to lose next November's election.
Well, it passes all understanding to know why this is going on at the moment. You think about what's happened to the Liberal Party in Victoria. This is their third leader in less than a year. So that's hardly a sign of stability as you're heading into an election year. And clearly, Jess Wilson is a woman who has some capacity. But as you point out, she's in her first term. She's 35 years of age. She has plenty of time yet. Who knows what the underlying issues are that are undermining Brad Batten at the moment. But clearly, when you're heading into a fourth leader in the space of a year, the chances of you winning the next election would seem to be getting more remote rather than more likely. Now, no doubt there are geniuses inside the Liberal Party who will tell you that this is all for the best. But this is a party that has been in government for 4 years this century. So something in that party is deeply broken, and it doesn't appear at the moment it's on the way to being fixed. But I'll defer to you, Peter. This is the branch that you know extremely well. You can explain to me what's going on down there, because to an outsider, it appears to be completely incomprehensible.
Chris, I thought it couldn't get worse when they lost the unlosable election to Daniel Andrews after Victorians being locked down harder and longer than anywhere else in the world, but they managed to lose it then, and I fear that's where they're headed if they go down this path tomorrow, but we will see. I'll come back to that issue. Chris, thank you.